This is I Dare You with me, Francesca Escoto, your host, where professional women over 40 get the courage to embark on a new adventure. Welcome, everyone. Today we have the pleasure, my pleasure, of having Maggie Reyes with us, who is marriage MBA coach. She is an amazing coach. I have been following her for a long time, but we have actually been in each other's professional worlds for probably 10 years at this point. So thank you so much, Maggie, for choosing to be here, part of the I Dare You community. Tell me more about you.
I love it. I'm happy to be here. So as you mentioned, I am a marriage coach for type A women. I do a very unique thing sort of in the marriage space. I do individual marriage coaching for the person who wants a better relationship. So that's kind of the central part of my work is if your partner, for whatever reason, is averse to counseling, doesn't want to go to a workshop with you or something like that, you can still make your marriage better. You can still feel better in your relationship. So that's what all my work is about. And I'm a feminist marriage coach, which is kind of also very unique in that I really teach people that they don't have to stay married if that isn't for their greatest self-expression, that they can either get closer to their partner or get clear about what's possible with that person, and that either choice is beautiful and powerful and valid. And that's also a central sort of tenet to the work that I do. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, you might not remember this, but I was going through a divorce and going through maybe we're gonna reconcile, and you and I were on the phone. You might not remember this, but we were coming out of a restaurant into a car anyhow. But yes, I am a testament of sometimes what you have to do is get clear.
Yes.
And just move forward and do what you need to do. I am happily remarried at this point in time. And so yeah, it's a good place to be. So anybody looking for a marriage coach, Maggie is your gal. Definitely someone you want to work with. Now, I want to go back a few steps, and we're going to talk about marriage and business in a second. But I want to start with, I remember distinctly that there was a time that you actually left your job, JOB, and you were full-time coach.
Yes.
And I want to go back to that moment, and I want us to talk about a little bit the courage that it takes to make that leap. As a woman in your marriage, right? Like there were, I'm sure there were different considerations and conversations, and how did you muster the courage to do that?
So that's interesting. In my case, I don't know if it was courage. There's some things that definitely take courage. I was very burned out by the time that I left corporate, and my sweet, sweet husband sat me down and said, your light is diminishing. It's like, it feels like it's extinguished. And as Francesca, as you know, I'm a very enthusiastic, sort of effusive person. So if that's my norm. So if I'm not that, it's very like apparent. It's like something has gone wrong. So my husband was like, I feel like something's going on. So things that I did was I knew that I had started blogging, which is how we originally met. I had started sort of planting the seed. I wasn't totally sure what I was going to do or what it was going to look like, but I had started doing some things just to sort of get my name out there, just to refine my ideas. And then I actually did, so I was a recruitment manager for a luxury brand, and I actually did recruitment consulting. I don't remember exactly now, maybe a year and a half, for quite a while before I fully left. So I left my job, but I didn't leave my profession until coaching could really sustain it. And I went very gradually, and I've actually talked about this with friends and stuff. So I am Latina. I don't have generational wealth. I don't have a big sort of, I don't know, trampoline or something or whatever that I could a cushion or anything like that. So I
am the cushion.
Right.
To others.
Right. Exactly. I did have the support of my husband, which is great, but he's also Latino. He also doesn't have generational wealth or anything like that. So we very much have like worked for everything that we have. We both like had scholarships for school and like stuff like that. Like we both come from that kind of thing. So it was I left my job, then I still did consulting, and I was able to work from home and do like what my profession was in a sort of part-time way while I built up my coaching practice, signed more clients. And then there came a time when I was signing enough clients that it was like genuinely a viable business. So I really want to say to people, it's totally possible. You totally can. And you need to know what your threshold is for different parts of that journey and be practical. So it's almost not like I love courage, but it's also like, what are the practical considerations you need to take? Like you need that plus courage.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I'm hearing, and well, so first of all, I have a masterclass for women who want to start that side hustle.
Love it.
And so I am excited. If anybody is interested in that, the information will be in the links, and you'll be able to get access to that. But here is why the side hustle is important. And I think that you touched on it. And it's this concept that, I tell my clients is that courage is incremental. And so you don't have to dare to do everything today. You could just take the next step. You just have to be brave enough to do the next thing. And you don't have to do item number 10. You actually should do 1 and 2 first.
Yes.
Right? Because courage builds upon itself. We do a brave thing today, and suddenly tomorrow we feel courageous enough to do the next thing. And if sometimes, and I don't know if this is true for you, Maggie, but I have found that if I know the big picture today, I'm actually maybe overwhelmed, intimidated, like the gap between where I am and where I want to be sometimes is big enough that it can be almost irresponsible. I don't know if that's the word, to try to be at 10 right away, right? Because I don't have the skills or the endurance or the knowledge or,
Yeah, when I coach people on goals, I really tell people some people are deeply inspired by big goals, and that's you listening to us, great. And some people are shut down by big goals, and we need to locate ourselves. We need to locate like, am I the type of person that if you give me something that feels very achievable and very doable, that keeps me working? Or am I the type of person that I really need the big goal to be inspired to do the little things? And wherever you fall in that, just locating yourself is really important, because sometimes we lack motivation, and it's like, oh, it's not that we lack motivation, it's the goal isn't big enough, it's not inspiring, it's not worth leaving your job for. It's like, okay, we need to make the goal bigger. Sometimes like, oh, I lack motivation, oh, it's because that feels so far away, like I'll never get there. Why start now if I'm never gonna get there? Where it's like, oh, but what could you do tomorrow? So yeah, right sizing that and being in relationship with your goal is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So then tell me a little bit more about how you motivate yourself to do those hard things. It goes right into what we were saying.
Yeah, perfect segue. Okay, so a couple of things. So I'm pretty sure I have undiagnosed ADHD. I'm not diagnosed. But one of the things that I've noticed is I have to be interested. I have to have a strong why. Sometimes my strong why is I have a mortgage to pay, right? Like that could be a strong enough why. But sometimes my strong why is like the mission and helping humans. So it depends. But one of the things that connects me to my goal always is locating the why behind it. Then sometimes that why, like I said, it could be part of sort of who I want to be in the world. It could be a practical consideration. It kind of depends. One of my biggest growths and learnings and things that I'm working through as an entrepreneur who's like my own boss, who has, deadlines and clients and commitments and all kinds of things, is, and when I was in corporate, I used to bulldoze everything. Like there wasn't time for motivation. What the hell is that? It's just like, it has to be done. We go and we do it. And that's just, keep going, right? It was that kind of thing. And I grew up with a single mom. We had some very rough times in my childhood. And so it was kind of like the way out is to work hard. And so for me, it's the interesting part now is using that same motivation, but relating to it differently, where it's like, wait, what if I worked hard enough? How much is enough? How many hours is truly viable? Like, especially if you have a side hustle, like, how do I organize myself that I also have rest and times of joy with people that I love and work? It's like, there's something about, um, deprogramming the I must get it all done.
Yeah.
And finding the motivation that is it's kind of like if we used to use gasoline and now we're using natural like fuel or something, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's a different fuel, it
Yeah.
works a different way. That's like where I am in my season of life
Yeah.
now, if that makes sense.
And you know what? It feels different in your body.
Yeah.
Because one can be fear driven
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
And that feels like literally, if does it come from your gut? Does it come
Yeah.
from another place? Do you carry the tension of here? Like
Yeah.
where in your body are you feeling? It might be a good way to gauge that as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So
And to
good.
kind of know, is this a Billy Rubin
Yeah.
driven thing? Is this cortisol? Like,
Yeah.
what's the source of this bouts of energy that I'm
Yeah.
using to do this task?
Yeah.
So for sure, because one is more sustainable than the other long
Mhm.
term.
Yeah.
So yeah. Now, how do you recharge?
Mm-hmm.
So you
Ooh.
did hard things today, and
Yeah.
you got to do more later, and
Yeah.
then in between.
Okay. So a few different things here. So one is I find the joy in the work itself.
Mm.
So I feel less depleted when the work doesn't feel depleting.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an element of, getting to talk to you and having an interesting conversation and knowing someone's going to listen to this and it's going to brighten their day or give them hope or help them. So I find an emotional connection to, you know, the least fun thing that I do is I schedule my clients. I like to sort of schedule them out so they have a time in a day for like all their calls. And I like to do that part still. And it's very broke. Like there's nothing particularly fun about that.
Yeah.
But I think about their dreams and their hopes and how in these appointments we're gonna, do all these amazing things. And so
Yeah.
I find something to hang on to even in the task.
Yeah.
So that's one part of like staying charged is that the fabric of the or the flavor that I give to the work itself. So that's part one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, part two is my relationship to rest. So you said, how do you recharge? I give myself permission to rest. I
Mm.
recognize the cultural narrative that I grew up in. So I grew up in Miami in the United States of America, which is a very, Western industrialized productivity is king type of culture. And I have had to reprogram myself that rest is a priority, that it matters, that it fuels everything else, that I am not a robot, I am not an assembly line. Like I have had to, when I left corporate, I worked in HR, I was a salaried person, like I wasn't an hourly person. But the way that I thought about work was like, oh, when you're sitting at the desk, the hours that you work is how you measure what you're doing. And I had
Right.
to really deprogram and like decouple those things. So that's one, just the mindset of
Mm-hmm.
recharging is important and valuable and we should do it, to me is the first part of even the recharging is like that part.
Yeah.
I love to spend time with my husband, so we do just fun silly things sometimes. We last year started, we've never been like sports people. He's a gamer and I like Oprah and workshops and books and self-development and all that kind of stuff. But last year we started watching Formula One. So we
Okay.
watch it together and there's the races are usually on Sundays. So like we like look forward to the races and we like have our favorite teams and we like discuss all the things. And it's something that takes our mind away from
Mm-hmm.
our jobs, whatever projects we're working on, whatever thing is going on. So and it doesn't have to be a sport. It can be a hobby. It could be if you have kids, your kids' sports or your kids' activities. It's something that changes the channel in your brain so that you're not thinking about your to-do list or whatever else you have going on. So that's one. And then I like reading. I love reading just romance novels. It's not fancy, like literary
We're
reading.
not gonna get into Bridgerton. That's a
Fun reading.
whole other episode.
Bridgerton is a whole thing. Bridgerton is a whole thing. But it is one of my favorite things. I read the books 20 years ago when they came out. So, if you ever follow me on social media or you hear me talk, like I love Bridgerton, but there's a reason. It's because 20 years ago, I was like, somebody should make this into a movie. This would be really fun. And at the time,
voila.
But it took 20 years later, and here we are. So that's how I recharge. Is time with people I love and changing the channel is the biggest thing, whatever that is for the person.
Yeah. Sometimes, and you said it, you started there, which I think is the important thing.
Yeah.
There is so much expectation that we put on ourselves, that society puts on us, our family, our circumstances, depending on what that is. And I think that permission that sometimes we're waiting for someone to give it to us. We need mom, abuela, like my grandma's passed away, but she's still in here. Right. And I hear the voice, right? So it's learning to distinguish between expectations and needs, I would say, and knowing that potentially you can do both if you want to, that taking that rest and taking care of you does not mean that you're not going to do the thing. It just means you're not going to do it right now.
Yes.
And so sometimes that's the permission that people need to get things going. And so if you're listening and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, it's too much, it is a lot. And so the question is, how can you make room for you in the lot? Because the time is going to pass anyway. Sometimes we have this idea that, I don't want to fill up this time because, I'll run out of time. Well, the day is going to end whether you do the thing or not. Whether you take care of yourself or not, the day is going to end and it'll be tomorrow. And then, what is tomorrow you going to going to say, So question for you, Maggie. It wasn't in the stuff that I had shared with you at first, but I think it'll be a good one. And I'm sure you've addressed it before. Talk to me about being a type A woman. You're a professional executive. You want to do the side hustle either because you want more money, for a life project, or you want to transition to being an entrepreneur. And there's that husband who might or might not be as supportive, or you're concerned. You don't know how you're gonna balance that out. Some tips maybe for her to have that conversation.
I think that it gets tricky when we want our partners to believe in us when we don't believe in us yet. It gets a little tricky because you go to your partner and you're like, why aren't you 100% supportive and already buying me business cards or something, right? we have these reactions, and it's kind of like our partners. Okay, you know how like a dog can feel your fear and will like bark more when they feel it. And if you're like,
the shark smells the blood.
Yes, like you're super calm and you're super chill. You can just walk on by and the dog doesn't know anything. So it's the same idea with our partners. It's the idea that it's like if we're freaking out, sometimes we go to them for comfort, but they don't have the ability to comfort us because they're freaking out too.
Yes.
And so what I would say is know that your partner has their own set of hopes, dreams, and wounds. And that when you're going to change a fundamental way in which you live, which is, I'm going to have a side hustle, or I'm going to go part-time, or I'm going to renegotiate or start a new job because it's more flexible so I can do this other thing. That changes the status quo, that can poke their own fears and their own wounds, and it can make them also feel insecure about their own dreams. So sometimes partners are triggered because they're not following their own dreams, and then they say, you following your dream, and they're like, They have all these thoughts about themselves that have nothing to do with you,
That's
but can feel like that it has something to do with you, even if it doesn't. So what I would say is this, is go to your partner when you are clear what you want from them. Like if you want support and a pep talk, tell them, hey, I need support and a pep talk. If you want just to be celebrated and for some reason they don't have the capacity to celebrate you in that moment, it doesn't mean your relationship is doomed. It doesn't mean that something terrible has happened. They could love you and not know how to support you because it could also feel very foreign to them. So my husband has worked at the same company since he graduated from college, and he started as like an analyst and is now like a senior VP, right? And so having a business is like saying I'm going to Mars. He's like, what now? Right? Like it's such a different and why all the things. It's such a different point of reference. And it's been years of like me talking through, this is how I'm thinking about it, this is what we're doing, this is why it makes sense to me. And over time, he's been able to like understand it better and support it differently. So that's what I would say is if you're scared and you want support from your partner, but if you know your partner, what their traumas and worries and hopes and dreams are, you know how that's going to land 90% of the time. So you check in. Do you need to talk to your bestie or your auntie or your abuela who thinks you can do no wrong, right? Maybe you need to go and talk to abuela.
Or loves him more than you, because that happens too in las Latinas.
All those things, right? Like you need to choose like what is your support. And that's why like, you know, Francesca's a coach, I'm a coach. Sometimes you need to just talk to your coach because your coach has no, you know, we don't have any thoughts about how that's going to go. We're just like a slate that can just support you and troubleshoot and brainstorm with you. And it doesn't matter to us. We're not worried about our mortgage. You know, we're not worried who's going to take Pepito to baseball on Sunday. Like we don't have those things. So sometimes you need the coach support. Sometimes you need a friend, a family member. And then, so I would say is be careful with your dreams. Be careful with your dreams. A baby takes 9 months in the womb to be able to deal with the bacteria of the world, right? To be strong enough to handle the bacteria. So with your dream is a month old, you be careful where you put that.
Yeah, so much goodness that you have said, Maggie. I want to kind of take some nuggets from it. One is I'm paraphrasing. You know, but one is don't put the burden of your dream on your spouse. It is not their responsibility to make it happen. They can support to the degree that they can. And that has to do with their emotional stamina, their own career, their own hopes and dreams. Maybe they're dealing, I don't know, with health issues, or their mom is a mess. Who knows, right? So you ask for what you need, but they're going to give what they can. And then that leaves you as responsible for the difference to make it happen. So you have to want it bad enough for you that you're going to find it within you to provide what you need. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and you said la tia, la abuela, you know, there's all of that. I think the community of like-minded people is critical. And as entrepreneurs ourselves, we both have that, right? That place that we tap into, like, okay, today is hard, or today was great. You know, sometimes I'm doing 50 things and I have nothing to show for it, because it was like I had to connect the Stripe to the thing, and then the payment something, and then I resolved it, and it took a whole day. And my husband's like, "What you do?" I'm like, "I solved a problem." And all day, yes, that's what I did, right? And so sometimes they're just not always going to understand. They're living in their own world, just like I mean, he tells me all the things about cars, and I'm working on it, right? So having that, owning your dream, and making sure that you are the one moving it forward, and that you're enlisting others as assistants, not as drivers, because they don't need to make your dream come true.
Yeah.
So that was one. And then the other nugget that I took from what you said is the importance of that clarity.
Yes.
And it kind of goes back to something you said earlier when we started the conversation about making things practical and realistic.
Yep.
So that, you know, like, don't come to your spouse with, I just had a dream last night, a vision.
Yeah.
And I'm quitting my job tomorrow.
Yeah, no.
And I need you to be supportive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for someone to catch up with the vision as quick as you have caught up to it, right? Like, you're feeling all the feelings.
Yes. Can I add something to that? So this
Yes,
is a
please.
rule. This is a rule that I give my clients, you know, that I lovingly invite them to follow, which means do it. Okay. So the rule is this: no conclusions without context. So that when you said, oh, I had this dream and I'm quitting my job tomorrow, it's very different. It's like, I had this dream and I called my best friend who's a multimillionaire and she's giving me $500,000 and we're starting a coffee shop and I'm quitting my job tomorrow. It's very different.
Correct.
Right? Than this other thing. So it's like, no conclusions without context. You and the way I do it with my clients is because we'll have a whole coaching session where we'll spend a whole hour unpacking all these things, whatever. And then you see, you know, your partner walks through the door that night and you're like, we're going to Bali. And you're like, what? Right? And it's like, no, it's like, hey, I made this plan and this is what's happening and whatever. Like, no conclusions without context will serve you well for the rest of your life.
That's right. That is such a good way to phrase it. That is so good. Yeah. We can do that. We can do that even in conversation. Yeah. There are people in my life who just start, you know, the blue car, and you're like, which one? Like, what are you talking about? But that they were there. That's the starting point of the conversation, is 20 minutes after they thought about the thing. So yes, that's what I'm talking about, that we need to kind of have thought it through. If your partner is good at thinking through things with you, then by all means you invite them into that conversation. But that's not always going to be the case. And so you might want to do a little bit of that pre-planning so that the conversation is more productive, more fruitful, less stressful, and at least neutral, right? Like, you don't have to put someone in fear.
You do your best. You do your best to soften the fear. Yeah.
No, I was in Dominican Republic last summer, and every time I go, I'm like, this is home. I just want to be here more. And so I called my husband. I want to spend more time here. And I've been considering a business in Dominican Republic, and so I'm telling him about that. And he was so overwhelmed. I didn't know until I got home, because this is me in Dominican Republic over the phone. So I come home and he's like, we need to talk. I'm like, what happened? He's like, I'm not moving. So to him, it sounded like I'm making plans. Like, we're closing shop in Tampa. We're moving. We're doing this whole thing. He's like, I that's not what I want to do. And so, yes, context is so important when you're phrasing opportunities or things that you're considering. Yes, for sure. Okay, so what is the next big audacious goal for Maggie?
Ooh, when I know, I'll tell you. I'll come back and I'll be like, hey, this was what it was, and this is what I did.
All right, I will take that. I will take that. So any books? I love books too. So any books that you are reading, that you are loving, or that you would want to share?
Oh, totally. I love a book called Essentialism. It has influenced me greatly in a variety of ways. And so I highly recommend. The author's name is Greg McKeown. There's more than one book called Essentialism, so it's the one by Greg. That's that one. And he wrote another book called Effortless, which is the book that I'm reading right now.
Read that one.
Yeah, it's the follow-up to Essentialism. And I just started reading it over last week. and I'm finding it really interesting and useful. So sort of talks about the aftermath of what happened to his life when he went through essentialism. He's like, what happens when you've made your life as clear and as focused as possible and it's still too much? How do you manage that? Um, so those would be definitely two books that have been really useful to me and that I would recommend. I love books too. There's a book I try to like recommend books that aren't the most popular one, like everybody kind of knows about. So there's a book called Creating Money that came out, I don't know, more than 20 years ago, probably. And the author is Sanaya Roman.
Okay.
And it's a metaphysical kind of book. It's this book is about thinking about money differently. And at the end of every chapter, it has questions and prompts. So even if you're listening to us and you're not into like very woo kind of things, you can sort of, okay, be into woo or not into woo, but answer the questions, because that would be really, really powerful. So especially as you think about running your own business or starting your side hustles, like what is your relationship to money? How are you thinking about money? Like all that kind of stuff, right? That would be a good resource for that. So those are a couple that come to mind. And obviously, shameless plug, if you're in a relationship and you want to like feel closer and more connected to your partner, I wrote a book that has 400 questions in it. So it's not a book you read, it's a book you just do. And it's called The Questions for Couples Journal. And it just has different questions, and it has different categories of questions. It has fun ones, deep ones, about your past, about your future. And that's actually a good way to be able to communicate with your partner about big things. It's important to communicate with your partner about little things. So if you're thinking about making a big change, you're starting to dream about doing something new and different, then using a tool like the Questions for Couples Journal really helps you just have conversations about a variety of things. And when you talk about what are your dreams, what are your goals, what are your values, what freaks you out, you can have more nuance in those conversations because you've already talked about these things in sort of a safer, less threatening way.
Awesome. Just thought of this one. It'll be the last one. Because we have to use every media we have access to talk about this, but Kamala.
Yes.
Let's go. The K Hive. I am excited about what that represents for women, for women of color, but just for our country to be in a position once again to choose between something new, different, that represents the people, or a dying breed. So just
I have lots of thoughts.
And so not to get into politics like deeply or anything, because it's not anti this or pro that, but I am excited about what it means for women to have also the power to make that decision at this time, because that female vote is very powerful coming in November. So anybody listening, do with that what you wish. Did you want to add something?
I would say you must vote. If you're listening to us, and maybe you're an immigrant, maybe you became a citizen, maybe you have a different path, maybe you haven't voted in other elections, it is more critical than ever before for you to vote in this election. I grew up, my family came to the US because of communism, and my husband's family came from Nicaragua also due to communism. And so I have a different relationship to some of the political things that happen. I'm a Democrat who grew up in a family of Republicans. And I have a an understanding or a relationship where I can consider a lot of ideas, and I can get on board with a lot of things, and I can see people's different points of view and all of those things. But this is not that. This is not. This is when I was growing up. and we would have conversations like, oh, I think money should be spent this way, and I think we should budget that way. And Democrats wanted to spend a lot of money on social services, and Republicans wanted to spend a lot of money on defense, right? It was how we spent our money was the fundamental question, right?
Correct.
We're in an era where Kamala's opponent wants to end democracy as we know it. And I've been looking very closely. So anyone who's listening who is interested in this, look at what happened in Venezuela. Not this election now where they're
with Maduro,
with Maduro, but look at what happened in Venezuela before with Hugo Chavez.
Yes.
This is like a carbon copy, like a cut paste of a person who's promising all of these things to people who are needing something in their life and think that this is going to be better, and is very obviously sort of telegraphing all the things that are not going to be better, and actively doing things that are going to make things worse. And I talk about this with my husband all the time. I never thought in my lifetime that the United States would be on the brink of the end of democracy as we know it. Was not anything that ever crossed my mind. I was like, that would never happen here. Like, that's not a thing that would happen here.
This is why we're here.
Right.
We came here because we were running from, and the fact that here, like, you stop at a red light.
Yeah.
Everybody stops at a red light, right? Like this commitment to the law.
Yeah.
And the respect that we've had for those systems.
Yeah.
And then that has been eroding.
Yeah. So if you're listening to us and you think your vote doesn't count, it counts. Your vote is essential. Your vote is very important. Yes. And I would strongly encourage you to vote.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Vote. And I would say vote for whomever you're going to vote. It's important that you exercise that leadership, that as an adult, a professional, someone who is co-creating the future along with those of us that are doing things, then, that is an important part of you co-creating that vision and bringing that into reality. So get out there, do the thing, engage others also to vote. That's important. So with that, Maggie, thank you so very much for your time. I really appreciate you. And now we have to meet in person again, not in passing through the airports.
Everyone listening, we had the most amazing thing happen. I was like rushing to a flight. I was practically running. I was like, both like ships that passed in the night. Not even we live, but like in DC or somewhere, we were like ships that passed in the night. It was the most amazing experience, and I can't wait to like hug you.
I know.
Just running to a gate.
Yes. It'll happen. It'll happen soon. Thank you, Maggie, so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Until the next one, everyone. I'm not sure.